Jim back again to bring you guys another MMA fight prediction video. And this time I'm covering the UFC 167's main event that features a welterweight title fight where UFC welterweight champion George "Rush" St-Pierre defends his championship against the hardest hitter at 170, almost the reincarnation of Shane Carwin, Big Rig, Johny Hendricks, and what is to be a very interesting welterweight contest. I will give you guys a backstory to this fight that covers the road to each other, all the fights they've had in between, leading to this fight culminating at the anniversary show. Now, I will also give you guys a full fight breakdown of the two fighters and who I have ultimately walking out with the welterweight championship when it's all over. Now, without further ado, let's get this thing started right about now. Now, this saga between George St-Pierre and Johny Hendricks really kicked off at UFC 154, where George was looking to unify the titles against interim champ Carlos Condon in the main event, whereas Johny Hendricks looking to cement his claim as the #1 contender for GSP's crown against another top contender in Martin the Hitman Kampmann in the co-main. And ultimately, as we know, Hendricks dusted Kampmann with that devastating left hand of his. And George St-Pierre ultimately defeated Carlos Condon, becoming the undisputed champion and defending his championship successfully for a 7th time in a bout that had to be one of the best GSP fights in a long time, because we saw the champ in trouble for the first time in years. When Carlos hit him with that crescent kick, my God, I thought it was over with, because I was watching that in the movie theater. I was like, shit. But GSP showed that championship heart, went on to take down Condon, bloodied him up, and won the match. Clear-cut, unanimous decision. Now, with those victories in place, it was thought that GSP would meet Hendricks again, but this time in a fight. But that wasn't to be, because George took some time off, for some R&R, and then there was talk about him facing Anderson Silva. But that didn't come to fruition. Obviously, the fight we all love to see, but George opted instead to face Nick Diaz, of all people. Obviously, there's a super fight element to this. There's a beef. Nick's been talking tons of shit about George. He pissed the guy off. The guy's a former champion in Strikeforce. He's a bigger name than Johny Hendricks. He's beaten more notable names as well. He's beaten world champions and Frank Shamrock and BJ Penn. But the problem is the guy was coming off a bloody loss. And he hadn't fought in over a year. And Johny was beating all the top contenders. After all, he knocked out Finch. He barely beat Koscheck. He knocked out Kampmann. So, of course, you could consider him the #1 contender legitly, but that wasn't the case. Money talks. And, Nick Diaz went on to face George St-Pierre at UFC 158 for the welterweight title, while Hendricks, butthurt over the whole thing. He took it in stride and faced Carlos Condon, George's previous opponent, in the co-main event. Now, obviously, he won the fight against Condon at UFC 158, but it wasn't the most impressive thing I've ever seen, because when it's on the feet, Carlos was winning, but Hendricks had to basically nullify, Carlos' strengths by taking him down and controlling him. Because every time Carlos was getting the better of it, he had to basically take him down. I mean, he couldn't, use his left hand, obviously, because he was hurting, but you know, it just showed to me that the guy's pretty much limited stand-up wise when he's going up against a guy at a high level like Carlos, who's able to hunt him down with the stand-up and stuff like that. And, you know, it is what it is. I mean, he didn't, you know, put any heavy damage on Carlos, because if we're looking at from who did more damage and who did more work, obviously Carlos did more, but Johny did more in the judges' eyes by taking Carlos down and maintaining the top control to win the fight by unanimous decision. I mean, it was entertaining, but it just showed how limited Johny is standing up. Ultimately, George St-Pierre dominated Nick Diaz en route to a unanimous decision at UFC 158 in the main event by nullifying Nick's submission game, taking him down multiple times, getting top control, laying down the ground and pound, and keeping it at a kickboxing range every time he was standing up with Nick. And Nick wasn't able to get off anything significant. He only got a few body shots in, nothing spectacular. And it showed the difference between a complete fighter and a two-dimensional fighter with holes in his game. Now, with everything aligned, Johny Hendricks finally gets his title shot at UFC 167 in a bout where he has everything to gain. And the only thing George has to gain is a paycheck and another title defense. But he has everything to lose. The question is, can Johny Hendricks do what hasn't been done since Matt Serra and what 8 contenders weren't able to do, which is knock out George St-Pierre and take his welterweight title away from him? Nobody has been able to do that since Matt Serra. Or will the indomitable welterweight champion George St-Pierre stop the rise of Johny Hendricks, retain his championship, and prove once again why he is the greatest welterweight champion of all time and earning his successful 9th title defense overall? Well, the answer to that question will be answered next. Now, when breaking down these two fighters, it's obvious that George St-Pierre has the reach advantage over Johny Hendricks. He has a 76-inch reach to Johny Hendricks' 69-inch reach. George is slightly an inch taller than Johny. He's 5'10", Johnny's 5'9". When it comes down to who can last longer, obviously, if we judge by their fights, George, because George has gone, 5 rounds more times than Johny has in his 8 title defenses. Whereas Johny has only been a 3-round fighter. And we don't really know if he can go a full 5 rounds. Now, when it comes down to their striking, I think George St-Pierre has, the more diverse skill set striking with his Muay Thai, his boxing, and his Kyokushin karate skills. It's more diverse. He uses a lot more kicks, a lot of jabs, and of course the punch we always know is coming is that Superman punch of his. But I think he doesn't really have that big KO power like Johny, because Johny has 8 KOs in his 15-1 record, and when he hits you really hard, you go down. There's no doubts about that. If you don't have a chin, you're going out like a light. If Johny hits you with that left, it's over, baby. But Johny, he does have some, decent stand-up I've seen, in his tape. Basically his uppercut's pretty good. He does do some knees. He likes to use elbows, especially in the Koscheck fight to get him off of him, when he had him against the cage. And, he basically, if he can't out-wrestle you, he'll out-strike you. That's what Johny does. But can George knock out Johny? The only way he could very well do that is with that switch head kick of his. I mean, that kick that George has is so wicked. I mean, literally. He knocked Shields down with that thing. He knocked Finch down with that thing. And he used that to beat Hughes to get the title, as he hit him with that switch head kick, followed by ground and pound, the finish used by TKO. you know. But when it comes down to pure wrestling, obviously Johnny has all the credentials on paper to be better than George. The guy's a Division I wrestler. He never was a college wrestler or a high school wrestler, but he is arguably the best wrestler in mixed martial arts. Bar none. He out-wrestled John Finch, Josh Koscheck, and almost every other guy, and he fights. In even Jake Shields, who's a great wrestler. He out-wrestled him. He out-wrestled friggin' Hughes. The guy is a beast of a wrestler. You know, Johnny had trouble taking down Koscheck. He had trouble with almost every wrestler he faced that he didn't take out in the first round or second round. You know, in the case of John Finch, who he famously knocked the fuck out, and what the hell is that? Yeah, Charlie Brenneman. He knocked him out too, I think in the second, yeah. But yeah, Johnny has a lot of issues dealing with wrestlers, and he got explosive takedowns and stuff. But he might stuff a few of George St-Pierre's takedowns, but George is taking him for a ride. I mean, and maybe he might get a takedown GSP, but GSP will get right back up. Now, when it comes down to the jiu-jitsu aspect of it, George St-Pierre is a black belt Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He has some submission wins on his record. Johnny only has one submission on his record. That was a Darce choke, but that was a long time ago. We haven't seen him use too much jiu-jitsu these days. And I think if it goes to the ground, I mean, for submission-wise, I think GSP edges him there too. There's no dispute about that. Now, as far as this fight playing out, game plan-wise, I think George is going to, of course, defend his takedowns. You know, keep Johnny thinking. I mean, he's not going to let, stay in the pocket with Johnny. That'd be stupid. He'd get knocked out. He's going to basically, the jab, a lot of the jab. Nullify that left, a lot of jab and a lot of movement. He's going to try to set up that switch head kick, try to knock the guy down. You know, he's also going to try to overwhelm him with a lot of wrestling, a lot of top control, and a lot of elbows. That's what he likes to do. A lot of vicious ground and pound. Cuts, cut, followed with punches. And, try to pass the guy's guard. I mean, he hasn't had a finish in a long time. He might be able to get it this time. Who knows? He might be able to get a submission victory. Not a knockout victory, but maybe a submission victory. Johnny, he has to work on evading the jab. Evade those jabs, baby. Stay very close to George St-Pierre. When you're standing, try to you land that left hand. Set it up in your right, hit him with the left, stay on him. If you can't knock him out in the first round, just stay on him, literally. And just, to the body. Some knees to the body, punches to the body. Try to take him down. Defend his takedown, and when you're on bottom, wall walk, work yourself back up. I mean, and maybe Johnny has some great jiu-jitsu, but I've never seen it, too much, but he's worked himself up. Try to threaten George with submission attempts. Don't let him pass your guard either. Keep him in the half guard if you have to for the round. If he's on you and you can't get him off, keep him in the half guard. Try to cut him underneath, and literally try to land that, punch that George doesn't see coming, because the most dangerous hit is the one you don't see coming. And, Johnny has got to catch George off guard to really land that left and put him away. But ultimately, I think George St-Pierre is going to weather this thing out, win this fight, by unanimous decision as always. Wrestling, top control, ground and pound, But, maybe Johnny does shock the world and knock GSP out. But, mostly I got this fight at, let's say, 70-30. 70 for George St-Pierre, 30% for Johny Hendricks. But, that's just my opinion. But if you look at everything from their skill set, George is a more diverse fighter. He mixes it up better. The guy's actually been 5 rounds. It's not like when he fought, Sarah. The guy's more, how can I say, smarter with his game plans and his attack and approach. Johnny, he's a good fighter and all that, but he's not ready for George St-Pierre, in my opinion. Not ready yet. But we'll have to wait. George is going to go on and defend his championship against, who knows? I mean, of course, because there's a welterweight division right now is pretty clogged up. because obviously he won't fight Rory, but maybe the winner of Maya and Shields, I'm guessing, or maybe he fights Carlos again. But as far as Johnny's concerned, he's going to probably fight a couple top contenders, work his way back up to that title shot against George St-Pierre. And obviously there won't be any super fights with Anderson Silva unless Silva beats Weidman in December. Because obviously he ain't going to fight Pettis, because nobody wants to see that shit anyway. Just rape him for fucking 5 rounds. Nobody wants to see that shit. But this ends today's fight prediction video. I will see you guys for the next one.